Guys, deluded. We've seen Maitland now's signed a new deal. We've seen Freddie Ljungberg returning to the club, which I was going to say first, and then I switched the order around. We've also seen Calum Chambers and Lucas Perez has been linked with Fulham as well, but Calum Chambers, so let's focus on him in the video because we've spoken about Perez already. Now, Calum Chambers, if we're honest, I actually got a lot of time for him. I actually feel there's a player in him, but you guys know I love youngish sort of players, so I'm always going to say that. I actually believe when called upon last season, there was games when everyone played terrible, but those games he played good. Old Trafford, Chelsea in the Carling Cup, and any other time in the 10 appearances he made in the Premier League, he arguably lacked holding in terms of who should start out of them centre halves. To be fair with you, and he's putting a good account of himself. Obviously, the majority of his games were in Europa League. Even against was it Atletico Madrid? I swear Chambers held it up in that game if he played. I could be wrong, but I like to critique and call it fairly. I felt he's done well when he's called upon. He's had a lot of injuries this year, so it's sad. Last season, he was obviously on loan at Middlesbrough, and he had a good spell in the side. Obviously, they got relegated, but from a personal point of view, he was under Aitor Karanka, former centre-back. He's bound to have learnt a lot. He was playing for a team fighting relegation, so he learnt how to fight and all of them things there. So he's done a lot. I think he's had a decent season, and considering he's got 3 years left via signing a new deal, it's quite deep that he might be sold. Now, there's a lot of centre halves at the club. Specifically to Chambers, if we talk about his immediate peers, you've got Mavropanos, who's of similar age. He's not in the first team yet in terms of starting, but there's talk of, or we speak of him as possibly being one. He's putting good performances again, like against United, but you've seen he's rough around the edges when he got sent off for that silly foul, whoever it was against. So there's Mavropanos. Bielik he's made his debut, but he hasn't really been in the picture. There's always him. He's rated highly as a centre half. Chafe, I like Chafe a lot, but I do think there's a lot of competition ahead of him, and he might find it best to leave to develop as a player, but I think he's a very good player, and I'd love to keep him here. There's Chafe. So that's 3 young centre-halves. So obviously he's got his roommate and the person he's in America with on holiday now in Rob Holding. Add him to the mix, that's 5. So that's 5 young players, all spoken about as potentially at one point stepping into the first team. Unless you play 3 at the back, there's only 2 spots to start a game at centre-half. You need about 4 centre-halves, maybe 5 in terms of depth. So you could say there's spots for everybody, but then you need to also factor in Koscielny might be injured and he might be winding down in his career, but there's still Koscielny. Mustafi might be stalled, but he might stay, and he's still on the young side. And if Mustafi could be the centre-half we expected him to be, and if Unai Emery can make him improve, then that's a decent centre-half there. So there's that. So I've said about 7 centre-halves, and there might be more. Including Chambers in the way, and he's found himself at a crossroad in the sense that his peers and players slightly younger than him are at his toes, and he's never going to really start ahead of Mustafi and them lot there realistically, even though I felt because of Mustafi's form they should have, and I do believe when you play well you should keep your spot in the side. I do believe Chambers he needs someone to put a hat around him and give him some faith, because he has become a jack of all trades. We know he's played centre half, he's played midfield before, he's played at fullback. I do believe he's a good centre half. He's English. He could be a decent backup option if he could get some consistency. But also at 23 years of age, considering the fact that Fulham have just been promoted, 23 years of age, you can stay in London, you can stay for a team that's going to play you. They chased you last year, along with Cardiff, who has been promoted as well. There's also talk of how Chambers is willing to take a pay cut to play regular football. So these clubs, specifically Fulham, were interested in you. So if they're really interested in you, they're going to play you. There's a good crop of players there. Like I said, you'd still be in London. I'm sure you've stayed there for a number of years now. You're somewhat at home and things like that. You made 24 appearances last year, 10 in the Premier League. There's 38 Prem games. You missed out on around 28 of them, or actually 28 of them. I'm sure you want to play more, especially when you were more or less in the side at Middlesbrough until injury prevented you. So yeah, man. I'd probably, if I was him, see if I could possibly figure more prominently in Unai Emery's plans and see what Unai Emery is saying. Unai Emery didn't buy him like Wenger. Unai Emery probably doesn't. He knows all about him, but he probably doesn't care from a sentiment point of view. So we could sell him. He signed a new deal, so I'd say 15, 20 mil, maybe even more. If we could get that, that's a good offer, and I'd accept it as well. But I can't lie to you, I wouldn't force Chambers out of the club. Like, I wouldn't sit him down and say, listen, you've got no future, you need to move. It's only a thing where if a man came in the office to me as a manager and said, DG, I want to be more important in the side, I need to play more, or things like that, or an irresistible offer came in, because 15, 20 mil, really, realistically, regardless of the man's ability, if you put him at another top 6 club, they'll somehow shag it and get more money. But 15, 20 mil for Chambers is all right. I know it's not as white and black as this, but if we could take 15, 20 mil from a potential sale of Chambers and a couple others and buy a 30 centre half, oh yeah, that's another one. Socrates is coming into the club, so that's another one. If we could buy a certified borderline world class centre half or someone that is arguably cut against the rest, then that's a hit. But I do think his adaptability and things, he could have something to say, man. I don't want to write Chambers off. I don't know why, but I really like Chambers, man. He's had some terrible games, but I don't think he's as terrible as people go on about, man. And when he's had good games, it's whispered. So, yeah, man. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens if we really have 50 mils in the budget, in regards to our transfer budget. Then the likes of Chambers, as sad as it is, possibly I don't want it to, but maybe even Holding might be sold. Chambers, maybe Holding. A lot of these players that contracts are winding down or on the cusp of the team, they might be sold to raise funds, and you have to be cruel to be kind sometimes. So maybe that happens. Specifically to Lucas Perez, I mean, if I was him, I'd entertain the Fulham offer. I know being linked with Lazio and Napoli, and then Fulham isn't exactly the same, no disrespect, but it's a Premier League club. They might give you an upgrade on your wages if they can afford it. Premier League club, can try and make a success of yourself in the Premier League. I would at least hear them out in it. And to be fair, but at the same time, I'd keep, you guys know my feelings on Lucas Perez. I'd keep him for the squad. It's similar to Chambers, the right offer, you gotta go, but I'll keep him, man. I don't feel Perez had a fair chance. I don't feel he could ever play through the middle, but rotation, Carling Cup, FA Cup, maybe a couple Europa League games, someone off the bench that's a bit different, add something to the side. He might not be the best player, but it's all about having people that complement the side, that bring stuff that other players don't. If you've got enough players that enable you to play different ways or enable you to tailor games in tactic games, you have a more chance of winning games. And if you have a more chance of winning more games, you have more of a chance of winning the league. These things are simple. It's not as black and white, but these things are simple. If you're more unpredictable, harder to play, or have different personnel, you have more options. Now, there is a debate for when you have too many options, do you have any to a degree? But that's for another day, man. And on that note, guys, deluded, get in the comments, subscribe, and do the rest. Thank you, as always, for watching. I'm out.